So we start in 1 minute. Yeah. Okay, good morning everyone and welcome to the event on battery passport as an enabler for sustainable and transparent supply chains. Good to see a lot of people in the room today. I mean, we were thinking whether to have like an open kind of room format on a round table, but in the end I think also the round table fits well this event. There are still some empty chairs if you're going to come closer. You don't need to necessarily participate in the discussions if you are closer. But yeah, if you want to be, let's say, closer to this panel, I mean, there are some seats available. In case you don't know me, my name is Vasilios Rizos. I'm head of Sustainable Resources and Circular Economy at SEPS. And just a couple of words, a little bit to introduce the topic. I mean, if you have followed the debate around circular economy since, I think, 2014, when the topic emerged in the policy debate, I think you are very much aware that lack of transparency across supply chains always emerges as a key challenge for implementing circularity on sustainability. And in fact, almost every research piece that I have encountered over the years that I'm working on this topic identifies lack of transparency as a key, as a major barrier, if I could say. Now, a specific digital and policy tool that aims to really revolutionize, if I can use this word, Volker can tell us later, that revolutionize the way data is shared and basically collected across supply chains is, of course, the digital product passport. And batteries is, of course, the first product group for which the digital battery passport will be a legal requirement as of 2027, if I'm not mistaken, through the recently adopted battery regulation. But then in the coming years, we will be seeing more requirements for further product groups as part of the Ecodesign for Sustainable Products regulations, which is currently under negotiation between the Council and the Parliament. Now, while the framework is still under development, and certainly there are a lot of things expected to see in the coming years, there are a lot of open questions that people have around the digital product passport, and I think a key question is how will it be practically implemented across supply chain, how it will look like, whether there are any key existing challenges, and of course how in practice is going to align, to force or to enable actors, if I can use the right word, to connect and exchange data. So I think these are some key questions, and I think we need more evidence and we need more discussions to inform policymakers, businesses as well that are expected to adopt the passport, but also researchers and NGOs that they work in this theme. And this is really the objective of this event, to look into these challenges, to discuss practical examples that we already see in Europe, and also maybe discuss also potential ways to address existing challenges that we see in the implementation of the passport. Now, for this, we have really collected a panel of experts from, first of all, from different parts of the value chain, of the battery value chain, but also experts from standardization organizations, research, and NGOs, in order to discuss these questions. And of course, the event, it's important to mention, is organized in the context of a EU-funded project named PATRO, which aims to develop and implement circular economy business models for lithium-ion batteries in the EU, and you will hear more information about the project quite soon. Now, just a few words about how we're going to do this today. First, we will start with a presentation, a short presentation of what PATRO aims to achieve and what we have done so far. And then we will move on to a panel discussion. And if, of course, all goes well according to the program, we will have plenty of time to get your inputs and questions for our panelists. Keep in mind that, of course, the event is recorded as we usually do now at SEPS, so it will be made later available in YouTube in case you want to spend some time to go back to some of the messages. So it will be there online. So no need if you miss any important information or any kind of, I don't know, contact or issue that to worry. Now, without further delay, I would like to invite, first of all, Bastien Hualpa. I'm not going to attempt to pronounce the full name, who is the Senior Manager at the Leita Technological Center. And Bastien is also, of course, the PATRO Project Coordinator, and he will give a snapshot of the project and what we aim to achieve through this 4-year Horizon Europe project. So, Bastien, please.
All right, check, check. It's working? Fine. Thanks for this sweet introduction. Thanks for this invitation. I think that every partner from the battery project is pretty excited to be able to showcase what has been done, and in particular regarding the battery passport. So my name is Bastien Walpa Descaiter. If you're wondering how you pronounce the second one. And I'm a senior project manager representing LEITAT, which is a leading Spanish research and technology organization on different sectors, multidisciplinary, multi-technology, and we're also coordinator of the battery project. So battery project stands for recycling of end-of-life battery packs for domestic and raw material supply chains and names circular economy. You have the keywords in the project name, and our ambition is to contribute to the European strategy autonomy on both energy and industry. All right? So how do we pretend to achieve that? So brief presentation on the concept, because here we have experts who will be able to dive into the different specificities, is first that it's a collaborative project between 18 partners from different countries. We have research technology organizations, we have universities, but very important, we also have industrials. And as you know, innovating is great, but also we have to be able to materialize this innovation and to sell it. So pretty excited to have these manufacturing industries in board with us. So first of all, we start with the end-of-life battery pack assessment, which is the first step for us to start with this holistic assessment of the battery packs. Later on, we work on the different battery disassembly using different techniques and expertise proper to each partner. Later on, we go with the mechanical pretreatment to have the black mass. Comes then the selective recovery of different materials using techniques and technologies proper of each partner. And then we have working with the manufacturers to validate and potentially adopt these different processes. From a more transversal aspect, we work also on the social economy and sustainable approach via LCI assessment. And finally, the main output will be 2 pilots from 2 companies, one in Spain and one in France. Those pilots want to demonstrate this recycling and end-of-life battery manufacturing. On one side, we have B-Planet with the first pilot on semi-automatic EV batteries for pack disassembly. And secondly, we have Orano in France with the second pilot for pretreatment and hydrometallurgical recycling. So this is a brief presentation on the battery ambitions concept, but I think it will be more interesting for everybody to dive into the specifics of today's topic. Thank you.
Thank you, Bastien. Is there any question for clarification, something that you would like to know about Batro? I guess one thing you can do is, of course, type batro.eu and find more information about the project. Maybe I have a very short follow-up question, Bastien. Yesterday, of course, it was the raw material week, and I think that was the busiest kind of raw material week in this 8th-year course. So there's really a lot of hype around raw materials and, of course, around developing a battery value chain in Europe. And there is a lot of expectations from the European Union on these European Union funded projects, of course, to have an impact. One question that very often people have is that what are your plans after the end of the financing period, and how do you concretely aim to bring these solutions to the market? Because really at the European Union level, we need to move to the next stage of implementation and bringing these solutions that we develop in the projects in the market. So maybe a couple of words of how do you see this coming into play in terms of bringing the solutions in the market? Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the definition itself of a project, it means that it has a beginning and it has an end. I think that we're all pretty conscious that we want to have sustainable solutions. I don't mean from the environment aspects, but something sustainable that's prolonged after the project. I think the fact that we're having industry on board with us, there's a specific interest to have this sustainable approach. And it will probably be with the 2 pilots. This is something that companies invest in. This is something they're pretty excited to do. So I think this is one of the key factors of success also of the project is throughout these 2 pilots that will be the beginning and not the end of this new industrial adventure.
Perfect, excellent. Thank you, Bastien. I think now we can move on to our panelists, and maybe I just give a short introduction about our speakers. We will first start with Volker Krumpel, who is the co-founder of MindSpider. MindSpider is a company that develops and implements product passports. So I think he's very well placed really to kick off the discussion and tell us what kind of insights they can already see from their work. We will continue with Francesca Poggiali, who will be with us shortly, who is the Chief Public Policy Officer at GS1, a leading European organization that aims to implement and design standards focusing on transparency across supply chains. And as you can imagine, of course, Francesca will be speaking a lot about standardization and how does she see standardization evolving in Europe around the digital product passport. Then we will move on to Ozak Durmus, who is the product sustainability leader at Ford Otosan, a major motor vehicle manufacturing company. Maybe you know them already. And Ozak, you will provide the perspective really of an end user of a digital product passport, but he will also explain the challenges they face in developing and implementing the circular economy business model. We will then continue with Cecilia Matea, who is Batteries and Supply Chain Policy Manager at Transport and Environment. I mean, if you are in this debate, probably I'm sure you know Transport and Environment, and very active Brussels-based NGO on transportation issues. And Cecilia, among many other things, she will also provide her views on due diligence and how does she see this part of the battery regulation, but also of the general policy mix on batteries evolving. We will continue with our very own Patricia Urban, who is a researcher here in our team in Brussels at CEPS. And Patricia will provide insights about our ongoing work at CEPS and in Batro in collecting information about digital product passports and identifying challenges in order to inform policymakers. All speakers will have 7 minutes for an initial contribution, and then, of course, as I said earlier, we will be having a lot of time for discussion. Now, I will start with Volker from MindSpider. Volker, I think, first of all, thank you for being with us today. And I think I can say that a lot of people in the room, they want to learn more about what is happening actually on the ground. And so what can you share with us? I mean, and is it working in practice? I think that's a key question.
Yeah, thank you for having me and for the warm introduction. Where can I start? First of all, as I said already, we are from MindSpider. We do this in practice, implementing battery passports and also product passports. We map supply chains, and we see that the battery passport is an enabler for sustainable and transparent supply chains, as you can see in the title. Let me check if this works. This way. Okay. So, and we have a vision as a company. I mean, we are a small company, a startup founded in 2018, and we think that a world where tracked and responsible products, this shall become the norm, and rather than the exception. But we also see we are still at the beginning. It's a long way, and Vasilios, you mentioned of course, it's tech that can help, but in the end, it's about the people. It's about the mindset. It's about helping people to understand what is in for them, why we do this, and why it's helpful. And also understand the problems. Because if you don't get it, why people are reluctant, why people are not moving fast or not as expected as the regulatory people want it, then there's a gap of understanding, and this needs to be solved. And I think this is why we are here, to understand that. Just to give you a quick introduction of our battery passport. So it's something that we developed over time. It's connected to a blockchain. It's something that you use with online tools. You can use it with mobile phones or with other systems. You can even introduce it into automated systems. And it's, of course, it's building or it's trying to really be compliant and meet all the requirements of the European regulations, but also of other regulations that apply. So we try to make a very flexible tool that we can adopt to any developments, because, as you know, regulation is not static. Also, industry is not static, and things develop, right? It's always work in progress and trying to adopt to different situations. What also is very important to mention, because this is a key element, privacy and IP rights and sensitive data and all this that we will discuss later, I think. We try to implement different layers, different data layers, and we try to keep it in a way that people can decide what kind of level of transparency they want. That means, of course, some data needs to be public because the legal requirements say that it has to be published, although this not generally means that everyone likes that or wants to do that or will do that, but in general, this is a key element. When you use a passport, you want to show something. But maybe you don't want to show everything, so we have layers that include privacy levels. That means it's only disclosed, for example, to your immediate customer that you sent the battery passport to, or the product passport. And we have layers that are meant to be transparent to those who are in the same supply chain. So, because these are the three general levels that you need, although there are different shades of that, and companies need to understand and learn what do we want to share and in which situations we want to share that. And when you read the European regulations, you already understand that there are all kinds of elements that are already considered in the regulation, where different sensitive data is involved and where you need it not at every moment, but only in certain circumstances. For example, when it comes to recycling, or when health and safety is involved, or other things. Yeah, and as I already indicated, we try to provide a very flexible tool, and we call that, we have a template system. That means you can design your own templates, or we design templates that meet specific industry requirements. For example, for the European industry, for the European legal framework. But Europe is not alone in the world. There are lots of supply chains that are global. And I think if you would dive, if everyone in this team here would see how global it is, how easily you end up in the end of the world with your simple product, because yeah, I mean, things come from everywhere, and raw materials come from everywhere. And it's really complex. It's really, in a simple smartphone or in a simple product, even in textiles, there is so much global elements in it, with global jurisdictions and local jurisdictions, and even very individual frameworks, company policies, or association policies, or standards, and all this stuff. And so it gets complex. And we try with this template system to be able to meet these requirements for the individual needs, depending on the setup that you have. So at the moment, we are mainly focusing on the automotive industry, on tech industry, on raw materials that are needed in Europe, for example. But this immediately touches other industries too. For example, when you have a car, there's plastics involved, there's leather maybe involved, there are fluids involved and liquids. So fluids is not the right term, I think liquids you say, right? But nevertheless, you see it gets complex. What we also have, I mean, this is a key topic, carbon efficiency and carbon neutrality to achieve that. And our tools are designed to help people collecting this information. Just to make sure that you don't misunderstand what this tool can, we don't do the calculation of the carbon footprint, because this is a different topic. There are different standards to do that, and it's complex. And we first thought, okay, maybe we do all the calculations in the background with this machine maybe. This would be doable, but at the moment, this is not the biggest problem, because there's lots of software that helps you to calculate that. Zima Pro, for example, many companies use for LCA calculation and so on. But what's more tricky is to get primary data, to collect information along the supply chain. And with our tools, we try to help people to collect this information. So we combine the templating system with these different formats to present the information. This is not only restricted to carbon information, it can also include recycling information, or any other kind of information you think is relevant for showing how, and for demonstrating and also documenting, and later being able to be checked by auditors, for example, when it comes to environmental topics that you want to address with your products, or that you are asked for to show and demonstrate. And also this can be helpful to and this is a topic that I will address later again. People are often not aware about their important role in the middle of a supply chain. They don't see even a small company can have a very important role in the supply chain because, I mean, they think, okay, we produce just a screw. But when you produce thousands of them, or when you produce them in a way that you can later easily dismantle it, that you understand how to recycle it, for example, it starts with small things, but a big car, for example, is built of these small things. It's tons of small things included in it. So no one should underestimate his role in the supply chain. Yeah, also there are people who are more reluctant to proceed and to implement new things and to change, and others go ahead. They want to show, okay, we try this, we try hard to do this, but when no one is recognizing that, that's a pity. And this is why these passports and digital product passports can be a tool to change that people become aware, oh, there's someone in my supply chain who really is trying hard. Let's see, how can we help them? How can we get more of that stuff that is better than others, or maybe better than others? Let's check into it. Let's talk, or let's compare this with others. Let's see who can set the next benchmark. So these are things, and as you may hear between the lines, this is more about communication. It's more about convincing people, showing and identifying those who want to go forward, who want to change fast and want to get into the next level. Let's get to the next one. Yeah, as we indicated already, this is of course very important for circularity. I mean, this is just a typical way to show circularity. In the end, when you see, this looks like a simple circle, but you have to imagine it's thousands of circles. It's a multiple complexity. Oh, sorry, is this too far away? It's a very complex thing when you see that this would apply to every element of a car, for example, or a mobile phone. It's not only recycling let's say, the item. It's trying to recycle all the items in it with all these different chemical compositions, which is complex. And so it looks simple, but in the end, it's a complex thing. And we think that getting access to the information that you need for recycling, or to get there to make it easier to recycle, because lots of things at the moment can't recycle, or it's not easy to recycle, or this is more important, I think, mostly, it's not commercially reasonable to recycle from a commercial point of view only, because it's too expensive. Raw materials often are quite cheap. Plastics, for example. Why should you recycle something out of plastic when you can buy fresh plastic for a very cheap price? We see that this will change, or we expect that this will change, because, for example, carbon border adjustment mechanisms and so on, that at the moment focus on very critical raw materials, or not only critical raw materials, but things like steel and aluminium, for example. But I expect that this will later change, or will be expanded to all kinds of materials. What we also see, I mean, this has already been mentioned, that we are part of these Bedrock projects, but MindSpider is of course involved in other projects too. One very prominent is Recirculate, which is also about recycling, reuse, refurbishment, and so on. But there are many other projects we are involved with, and we will also show you, or in future you will see more of them. Just in the next month we expect further announcements, because we are really involved in very interesting things, like, for example, in the PV industry and in other very dominant industries that are relevant to get a renewable future. What we see also, that of course with these product passports you can differentiate yourself, you can show others where you are, and you can attract people who are also working in the same mindset and who try to connect to you. And as I said, this product passport we see as a vehicle, but not only to demonstrate things, but also later to integrate robots and things that work automatically. Because what you have to consider, at the moment, most things are done manually. But as soon as you connect to ERP systems and other automated systems, IoT devices or robots that produce things, or that dismantle things, or that help in logistics or whatever, there's so much data around, and we try to connect these data points, although it's difficult for various reasons. But I think in the end, the battery passport can be one element, one link, that is opening doors and connecting to those who want to do that. When I'm over time, then let me know. I mean, it's So just one example, just to point out that what sometimes surprises us, for example, with Minzur, we work with since several years already, but they now recently decided to expand everything and made a public announcement, and suddenly their stock price went up and covered by 10 million. So this was really interesting for us to see because this means that investors look into this. They have an eye on that. Of course, it can be that the stock drops, who knows? But on the other hand, we see there is interest in this. And this is just a mine. I mean, a mine that most people don't know about because it's a tin mine on the other side of the world from here, seen from here. But tin is in everything. I mean, tin is really an element that you see everywhere. And this company is covering, I don't know, 16%, 80% of the world market. So it's a big share. And it's good to see that when people show we want to be transparent, we want to show how we work, we want to show that we try to make things better, we want to help with transparency, that this is kicking in. But of course, it should not be only the financial interest why people should do it. It should be because it really makes things more efficient when you have elements of transparency and make use of them. Coming to the key challenges, as I said already, it's complex. There are lots of uncertainties involved. I mean, you see this regulation. For those who are not used to read legal text, it's a lot of text, lots of words, lots of legal wordings. But there's also, the regulation indicates that there are things missing still, like methodologies and so on. And they will be developed, and we hope it will be developed soon. There's a timeline mentioned in it. And of course, many question marks at the moment pop up because these people are not aware or don't know what is exactly expected from them, because you need the methodologies to define that. But I'm confident that this will be sorted out. With the regulation, you can't answer all the questions usually because it's an abstract regulation and there's always room for interpretation. And there may be many things that still need to be settled and defined. But again, this is a question of talking to each other. Why do we need this information? Or may it be that, okay, it's sensitive data, it's involved with IP rights and so on. Let's be cautious to show that to everyone. But maybe make partnerships where you have more trust and where you can show later people when it's needed, for example, in the recycling process, that you even show sensitive data because you trust the people. And as I said, people are not familiar with it, with transparency and traceability. In the end, people are used to, I mean, this is an example that I always bring. It's very easy for me to get an NDA signed. When we reach out to companies, first thing you talk about is, let's sign an NDA. In the end, it should be opposite. It should be, what do you want to share? What is the information that you like to have? Let me help. Yeah, exactly. Sorry, a non-disclosure agreement is meant by an NDA, exactly. So people are used to not to disclose things, to make agreements on not to disclose things. This is a standard procedure. There are typical norms and standards to write these NDAs. It's all set in the end. It's quite easy to get that done. You get it signed in a few days. But the different way to make things transparent, to make agreements on that, this is a tricky thing. And when I think about the logistics industry, they solved it in a very interesting way. For example, with Incoterms. This is really something that we may check if this is something that can be modeled. Okay, 1 minute? Okay. So when you talk about Incoterms, then it's only 3 letters, but they define a lot, and people in a very simple language. But the logistics industry has adopted to that easily, and since, I don't know, 60 years, 50 years, I don't know when they have been implemented first, they have been developed over time. They became a standard, and everyone knows what to do. Everyone knows his role. Everyone knows what is insured, what is the liability, and so on, just with these 3 letters. And there are 8 or 70 types of Incoterms, but most common are 3 or 5 of them, and then everyone knows what to do. And I think this is what we need in this transparency world or in the recyclability world. And I think we will get there sooner or later, but it's a process, and it's a burden because people have to change. It takes a bit, and people ask often, what is in for me? I mean, there's someone who wants to have information, but why should I give it to them? What is in for me when I share that? I mean, I don't improve with that. I just share something. So it's always that, or it's often the case that um, major companies, OEMs and brands ask for information, but the smaller companies in the supply chain, or the mine even, they say, oh, we give you what you want, but why should we make that transparent to everyone? I mean, we are a mine. You can see how we produce. We have all the audits. We do everything compliant, but that's it. What do you expect? Of course, I mean, you want to audit these companies and so on, but to put this into a product passport, just that everyone 1,000 kilometers away has more information, we have to convince people why it's important for that. And as I said, this was just, as you saw in this example, when people implement these product passports, it can mean that the stock price goes up, but it can also mean that you show that you are one of these people, of these companies who want to develop, who want to change and adopt to the new, to the situation that is required to get carbon neutral. Yeah, and the other thing is what I think, what is the most important thing is to push collaboration, really, as we do it here. Help people realizing that they are important, helping them to understand why it's important, what is in for them, and really try to work together. Okay, that's it from my end. Sorry for if I took more time. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, is it working now? Okay, I hope you heard me. So basically, in order for digital product passports to have an impact, we need standards, and I guess the discussion becomes a little bit more complex when we go outside the EU as well. So Francesca, what can you share with us? How do you see this landscape of standards around the digital product passport evolving, and what challenges do you see? Yeah.
At first, excuse me. At first, thank you so much, Seps. You do it so well. You are my favorite place in Brussels because you take us out of the European area, you make us think, you make us liaise, and that's the perfect place to be. So thank you so much. I represent GS1, who is a standardization body, and don't worry if you don't know it. But I'm sure that before you go to bed tonight, you scan a linear barcode or a QR code to get a transport or to buy something in a place. Behind that beep, or maybe tonight you order something online for the Black Friday, behind that click or behind that beep, there is a standard. And behind that standard, there is an organization that keeps this standard open. Why don't we, consumers, users, industry, people every day, don't pay for this beep or this click? Because 50 years ago, some industry leaders who were particularly enlightened decided to leverage the linear barcode that was already invented by IBM. So we didn't invent it at GS1. We simply leveraged it and kept it open. Open means a lot of things. Openness in the process on how it is kept and maintained. Openness in the way we accept stakeholders' involvement and in the way we also collaborate with others. Openness means everything that the ISO has decided that an open standard should be. So we use open standards, we keep them open, and we keep them global. So the same beep that you hear in a shop here today, or the click that you hear in any marketplaces around the world is the same. And most importantly, that product that you have in your hands, or very soon you will receive at home, will be identified through a language that is standardized. We don't speak a lot. We are not a political organization. For many years, people forget about this. Industry also gave it a little bit for granted. We are an industry-led organization, so we are not mandated by the European Commission, and we are global. What has happened since the Green Deal and the circularity plan? The regulators in Europe out of a sudden said, okay, we can identify product then. There is a way to get product information that I can use to make circularity happen. And we were very glad to neutrally support circularity. So we are a big fan of circularity around the globe. But we think that circularity is something that needs to be achieved along global supply chains. It's very hard to get circularity, and this is one of our challenges. It's very hard to get circularity in only one area of the world. But we fully support that somebody needs to start, and this was the European Union doing it. So the battery passport saw us also involved. There is one standard mentioned in the regulation in Article 77, if my memory is correct, quoting that international standards need also to play their role in the battery sector, but also in other sectors for the DPP. Because having it only at European level would mean that your name, Vasailos, is Vasailos in Greece, and maybe in the EU, if all the other member states accept this name, but then for the rest of the world, you may use another name. Can you imagine the disruption, especially if you have grandparents elsewhere outside Europe? But also, when you go back, some of you probably traveled today to be here with us. You go back to the airport, and which name do you use? Maybe they stop you. So I'm trying to make very complex data things simplified. If we don't get standards for data, we don't go very far in circularity. I've heard the previous speaker saying data is needed, and that's the first challenge, because a lot of emphasis has been put after the Green Deal and the Circular Economy Plan on circularity, the green purpose, the CO2 emissions after the Paris Agreement, and that's great. I mean, I consider myself also an activist, so I fully support this, but not so much was said about that data needs to circulate as well if we want product and components to circulate as well. We need the circular data, and there are challenges to do so, because so far supply chains were linear. It worked quite well. I mean, if we are where we are in Europe, is that we were able to set, but of course nothing is perfect and we can do much better. So I had a couple of slides because I think visuals can help. Excuse me for my voice. GS1 is partner of CIRPAS. It's another consortia compared to the ones that you mentioned today. And this is a CIRPAS vision. We are in the process of renewing this visual because this was done before when we started the process. We will soon have a new one, and CEPS will publish it very soon in the post-event. This is what a digital product passport should be. And we as GS1, we like it because you see, it all starts with the letter number one. Who sees number one? It's a complex slide, I know, but there is a number one which says product ID. So you don't have a digital product passport if you don't have a product ID. At the end, circularity is about real products that are exchanged every day, that reach our houses, that we use every day in the offices and so on. So products needs to be at the center of it. So data is needed, but data should be a tool, because in some cases we see in some areas of the world, different from Europe, that data becomes a goal in itself. The data economy is perfect, it exists, and we hope it flourishes also in Europe very soon. But at the same time, it needs to serve the circular goal. Otherwise, we can exchange data per data, and companies already do it. We've been a champion in the B2C, in the B2B environment for more than 50 years. That's great, it exists. It's standardized data that is being exchanged every day B2B among companies. The DPP is about B2C as well. There is a role for the consumers to get access to this data and use it, but also not just the consumers. What happens also after we buy products and we use them? there is a second life, a third life, we can reuse components. How can you do all this without data? When you resell a product on Zalando, do you still look at the barcode or the RFID tag that you have, or you throw it away as a consumer? So first thing, don't do it. Because with this, you can do a lot of things after it's being used. And the RFID is another open standard that the GS1 keeps open. So first thing is the product ID. Then you need a data carrier. And this is another challenge that we have. Now that regulators learned that they can use product data, they want a carrier per every regulation. So if you read vertically the European regulations, they ask for a carrier to transmit the information that the regulation has asked. So if you read the packaging directive, for instance, now you will need to use a carrier to put a data carrier on your product to look at the recycled content of the battery. So for instance, I'm buying a portable battery, not the electrical vehicles, not the industrial one. I'm buying a portable battery. I need to know if I can recharge it how many times. I should go and have a carrier as a consumer, scan that carrier and get that information. Okay. At the same time, there is the ESPR regulation, the one with the DPP, which asks for a carrier. So I have another carrier, right?
ESPR, Ecodesign for Sustainable Product Regulation, DPP, Digital Product Passport, B2C, business to consumer, B2B, business to business. In case, yeah, I know.
No, you do it better than artificial intelligence. I mean, we should do it together. I mean, you are faster than. I'm sorry. That's true. Acronyms are not easy. But tell me, stop me if I say something wrong. So, another challenge is how are we going to have all these carriers? Well, actually, we have good news. One carrier is enough, and with access rights behind the carrier, when you click and you are a business partner, you can get the information that you need to make that product being replaced with some components. If you are a consumer, you get the information that the regulator has decided you should have for that product. I'm a company that wants to share more information with my consumers. For instance, I participate to the Sustainable Cotton Initiative. I don't know, I just make an example. Well, and I want my consumers to know more. There is another access right under the same carrier that drives the consumers to the place. It's just like reading 20 books at the same time. I don't know how many of you do it. It happens to me sometimes. But you need to be disciplined, okay? And that's where technology helps. What I'm saying is that there is hope if you use global standards. They do not close the data. Because closing the data is possible. Data is very worth today on the market. You have seen from the previous speaker that the market are looking very attentively what happens. Prices goes up and down based on the data they can use, how reliable you are as a sector, how transparent and how open you are. Right, yes. But this shouldn't be a goal in itself. To enable the DPP, because we are speaking about passports that every product should have, so there must be a very basic layer of data that is accessible through standards that will enable company investments to go to the next level, including on data, but based on a common layer. They shouldn't be very expensive. I'm not saying the standards are for free. I'm saying that they minimize the cost and keep it possible for everybody to start from a common layer and go to the next level if requested and if we wanted. So CIRPAS is working on this. There is a website for CIRPAS where there are a lot of deliverables and more. CIRPAS is now counting the months because we will be closing very soon. So, but what are we doing when I say that the GS1 community is open to circularity at regional level? We want to leverage the European efforts globally, because keeping circularity only in your garden, imagine, it's like for us, your garden, Bacillus, is perfect, you enable biodiversity, you have little animals, but if your neighbor just after next to you uses pesticides and fertilizers every day, and I don't know what, they cut the grass every day, or I don't know, you don't go very far, as right? So the same will happen to Europe. We are here to leverage what the European Union wants to do on circularity and on data, and to ensure that it becomes also a global language. That's why we opened up a global standardization table exclusively for the DPP, cross-sectorial. So we are not going very much into the details of batteries, but if the battery, because we esteem already that there are several pilots on battery funded projects, so we are an organization that work on the how. When all the political discussions will be finished and ultimately the discussion will go, and now how do I do it? Well, the standards are ready, the standards are following the political discussions, but taking a little bit of distance because ultimately for us it doesn't really make sense if we discuss about 20 data requirements that should be exchanged with the passport or 25. Technically everything is possible. We live in an era, and I'm speaking to generations that are younger than me for sure, where there is no limit. It's possible to click and enable the digital product passport already today without the legislation, frankly. But it was great to have a legislation because we are here to discuss this now, right? We have timelines, so we need to obey to regulators, and that's perfect because in the last 50 years we were a little stuck without them. So now they tell us what we need to do, they tell us even how to build the data and exchange the data, perfect. But we think that this should be then enabled also at global level in sectors that so far they probably forget a little bit about. They started with the battery because probably there was a plan, although there are entire sectors that still don't collect, like the textile one, right? So 1 minute. So these are our challenges. We opened up a working group. You don't need to be a member of anything to participate. We also accept researchers, academics, journalists. That's why we say the standards are open, because our standards are made by the diversity of the different communities that participate with us. Of course, voting is limited to companies that then will need to use the standards, but participating is really open to everybody, and we take into account every comment in a written document that is available for everybody. So you just can and you participate if you wish. If you have issues, you come back to us. I think it's a way to build the future on the how. So do not participate in our debate thinking about what has happened through the trilogue yesterday on the digital product passport negotiations. This is not the place. Maybe SEPS is the place, or other associations are the place. With us, you only discuss about the how, and the how relates to basic principles of data that needs to stay open, data that needs to serve circularity and safety and other goals, data that needs to be available for everybody, for any purpose, but standardized data. We're not speaking about millions of data attributes that should be given to consumers or to anybody. We understand that nobody can really read all the chemical substances in one product, especially when you have only 5 minutes to make your purchase. But relevant information that consumers think are relevant for them are possible. Agreements need to be taken, but this should happen in a fair, in a transparent, and in an open way, also with global stakeholders, because otherwise we don't go very far, and it's urgent. We are not meeting the goals that were so well set by the United Nations. We are seeing the red lines everywhere in all the goals, and the data one can really accelerate. It can be a multiplier. But we need to be disciplined in using data in a standardized way, not to have costs raising too much, or for data to become a goal in itself. So this is what GS1 does. I remain available for questions. I give it. Did I respect the 7 minutes? More or less. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Francesca. Passionate as always in your contribution, and I think your call for global alignment was echoed in the room. And I'm sure we will get later into the topic of standardization and what's happening globally, because I have a couple of questions. For the time being, maybe we move to the next speaker, and we have with us Ozak Durmus, as I mentioned earlier, from Ford Otasan. So Ozak, thank you for being with us. Ford is also, of course, a partner in Batro. And yeah, we look forward to hear how do you see sustainability in the company, and how do you see the digital product battery passport as an end user? Yeah.
Okay.
First of all, thank you inviting me. It's very exciting to be here with different kind of expert from the variety of industries. Firstly, I want to actually mention about our company because you're already familiar with Ford, of course, but not familiar with the Ford Otosan. Fordson is a joint venture company of Ford. Actually, Ford Motor Company is one of our shareholders, and the other company is the Koç Group, Koç Holding. Actually, Koç Holding is the one of the biggest holding in Turkey, and yeah, almost 45 to 40, 50% of the I can say the value of the Turkey is coming from the different companies from the Koç Holding. For example, us, yeah, we are the yeah, export leader like the last 10 years, and our company building and designing commercial vehicles like the medium commercial vehicles. You already know we are the transits, and we are producing transits, and yeah, every transit in Europe, yeah, they produce in Turkey. And we are building light commercial vehicles like couriers, and we were producing couriers in Turkey, but yeah, we will start in this year at end of this year in Romania Craiova factory. We take over the Ford Romania Craiova factory, and also we are producing commercial passenger vehicles Puma over there, and also we are designing and building the Ford trucks, heavy duty trucks also in Turkey, and also we are designing the engine and also the powertrains and producing in Turkey in our own factory. And our recent capacity is per year 700,000 vehicle is not small number actually, and we are aiming to reach 1 million car production per year with 2030. And also, you may heard the Ford Volkswagen agreement, the common production, and also we in this year we have started produce Volkswagen vehicles in our own factory also. And in this case, actually, I want to bind this with the passport and the data because yeah, confidentiality is very important for us. Even I can access a lot of data in the company because yeah, we have a lot of data and a lot of know-how, and we won't sacrifice from the confidentiality and also with the transparency. We have to we need both together. That's why actually I really trust the blockchain system and this similar systems because we need both of them. We need yeah some of the data to show everybody as a public, and some of the data we keep as a secret, confidentiality. Only in the necessary cases we need to show it, and that's why I think this kind of systems is very important, and I want to briefly mention about that. And with the some numbers, yeah, we have more than 20,000 people in our company, and we have an R&D center in Turkey, Istanbul, and more than 2,000 people working in the R&D center. Yeah, just these are just numbers, but yeah, I want to mention about the size and the impact. And these are our sustainable targets, Ford Otosan sustainable targets. Of course, we are for the targets we are aligned with the Ford, but some of the targets we are even even have stronger targets regarding to the Ford's global. But yeah, at least we are aligned for the everything, by the way. But not just the, by the way, environmental targets. Of course, we have very strict targets for the carbon transition for our products. Yeah, they will be zero emission vehicles, at least fossil free, because yeah, as you know, electrification is not the one solution. We also have solutions like the hydrogen combustion and the fuel cell vehicles. And also we have targets for the suppliers to be carbon neutral, for the logistic to be neutral, and of course all our facilities will be neutral. And also for the circular economy, yeah, we want to use 30% recycle or renewable plastic for our components, vehicle components by 2030. But also we have targets for the diversity, equity, inclusion, and the community. Yeah, there are lots of things, there are lots of information I know, but yeah, you can access all kind of information from our website because all kind of this information are public actually. That's the good side. And our aim is the leading sustainability, accountability, transparency practice in automotive industry, the countries we operate. And And also I want to briefly mention about our new approach. And yeah, I'm leading this approach. I'm product sustainability leader at the Ford Otosan, and I'm leading these three studies: sustainable plastic applications, actually sustainable material application in general, I can say. But yeah, we have obvious targets for 2030. That's why I want to mention about that. We have a lot of different studies, and another topic is the circularity of the EV battery, because yeah, EV battery is maybe the most important component in the electrical vehicles. That's why we right now we are talking about the digital product passport, because it's really worth to create a system on that. Because yeah, I can say almost half of the value is coming from the battery for a vehicle, and also half of the carbon footprint is coming over there. And that's why actually we build a system for the circular economy for the EV battery. Not just by the way recycling. This is the last solution, I think. The repair, remanufacture, reuse, second life application, recycling, and using the recycled materials for a new component. These are all important, and we have to trace for each item, each process. And of course, we are doing life cycle assessments. We are doing life cycle assessments for the process, for our components, for our vehicles. Because if you don't measure, how you can understand your current situation? That's why we are doing life cycle assessment studies, and in order to understand our position, create a roadmap to how can we reach the carbon neutrality. Because product is just one item, but also we have to drive our all our supply chain. And we are going to the batro. I try to keep short, because yeah, you can reach this kind of information a lot of place, and I want to take a lot of minutes for the discussion, because I'm sure you have a lot of different questions. And for the batro, and yeah, Bastian already mentioned about the batro, but briefly I can mention what we are doing for the batro. We are actually giving our scrap batteries for the batro project, and there will be second life applications and disassembly of our batteries, and using this kind of using these batteries for the recycling. And also we are working together with the Renault JSV map and LATAT for the Ecodesign guides, and also we are doing life cycle assessments, and we are doing life cycle assessment for comparable also because we want to also measure the LCA studies in Turkey, in Europe, because we are not part of the union, but yeah, actually we have a lot of partnership trade activities with the EU, and yeah, it's very important. We have to be aligned for everything. And for our expectation to build a system for the EV battery passport, understand our environmental impact for our batteries, and creating eco design guides, not just for us, also for the other related people and the companies for the EV battery business. And there are some discussion points I want to mention about. Actually, these are open questions. Actually, one of them is the adaptation of the EV battery passport and the systems with already existing system, like the IMDS, the International Material Database System, because already all of our suppliers and we use the IMDS system, and there are a couple of information over there. And we have MSTS forms like the material data sheets, yeah, because of a lot of safety documents. There are some information over there. And yeah, in our systems, yeah, in SAP and the other system, there are a lot of information. And the question is, yeah, we have to enter the data for each time and for every different platform, or can we combine together? If we can combine, and yeah, if we can standardize, yeah, it's very easy for everyone actually. And also it's very important to keep the data actually in the same standard, because we have seen, yeah, some of the data, for example, for our plastic component, we get the data from the IMDS system, and we get the data from the other system, and they are not aligned actually. There are some differences. So that, yeah, we have some standards. And also another question, who can access the data? How can we keep confidential information without sacrifice transparency? Because as I mentioned, we are producing Volkswagen vehicles, but I don't know the details of the vehicle. Yeah, of course there are some people, they are working on this project and they know everything. But should I know the details of the project or the materials in the component? Actually, I don't want to, because yeah, you shouldn't forget that data is responsibility. If you know the data, if you have the data, you're also responsible to keep that. That's why actually I don't want to know all the details for all the projects, and I shouldn't. That's why it's really important to keep the data safe. And if there is a confidential information, we have to, of course, store the information, but we show it only the really necessary cases. Another thing, communication of the EV platform between each other. How many different platforms to require to create battery passport? Because right now we are working with Volker, and we are working in 2 different EU projects, as he mentioned, the Batro, also Recirculate project. But in the future, maybe we want to work with another company, or yeah, you can think all the supply chain, from the minerals to the battery producers to recyclers. Should we use all of us the same platform or the same for example, if you do this with the blockchain, the same blockchain company? Is it possible? Yeah, to keep the same supply chain of not just 1 year, 5 years, 6 years. Is it possible? Yeah, we have to integrate the systems. And this is another, actually, the question mark. And yeah, my final words, the cooperation all along supply chain is needed to ensure the sustainable EV batteries. Thank you.
Thank you, Ozak, and a very interesting statement that data is responsibility. And I think one of the topics we can get into later is how do we build the processes that can provide reassurance to different supply chain actors about the data, and then the actor basically does not need to worry about where the data comes from or what the data basically says. I think that's actually quite a complex, question to get later. Yeah, I think another important domain within the digital product passport is, of course, the social aspects, where the passport aims to dive in quite briefly. And we have with us Cecilia Matea from Transport and Environment. And Cecilia, I think you have looked into these requirements on due diligence. So I'm curious to know whether you think they are ambitious enough, whether you see any gaps, and any thoughts on how this can be further strengthened. Yeah.
Sure, thanks so much. Thanks for the invitation. So just very briefly, I know that some of you know transparent environment, but maybe not everyone in the room does. So I'm just going to give a super quick introduction. So transparent environment, we are Brussels based. That's where our headquarters are, I guess. But we really operate across Europe. And our theory of change as a green NGO is really to use regulation as a tool to get corporate change. We're member-based, so you see here some of our members all across Europe. But more importantly, what does TNE do? So these are our areas of work. So TNE has been around for just over 30 years now. And historically, we've worked a lot on cars and decarbonization of cars. So how can we get car makers to improve on air pollution, for example, on CO2 emissions, so on and so forth. So we work on cars, trucks, aviation and shipping. We also have a sustainable finance program, an energy program, and most recently a raw materials one, which is the one I work in. Why? Well, very easily, the jury is out. We are to electrify the fleet. So there's an ever more, there's a greater scrutiny around how are we going to source the raw materials needed and how are we going to also make them. So TNE, a few years ago, we started advocating to have a European battery regulation, so no longer a directive, but really a regulation for it to be updated, and to address the challenges that we would face and we are facing with EV with batteries for electric vehicles. TNE worked on three large priorities, which are the ones here on the screen. So the first one was responsible sourcing, right? The question that we all got years ago after the big amnesty report was, what about child labor in Congo? So responsible sourcing was a core pillar to really address and try and address these issues from a human rights perspective, but also an environmental perspective, and I'll come back to this in a moment. But we see battery passport as an important tool in all of this. The second one was sustainable manufacturing. So you've all seen the little drawing of an electric car being charged, and at the background you had a coal power plant. I'm sure it's gone around many times, pushed by the oil industry, really. So there, the question that we tried to address was, how can we make sure that these batteries are made with renewable energy? And there you have the carbon footprint provisions. Again, an area where the battery passport is super important. And then finally, the third one was, what happens to these batteries at the end of their life? Recycling and circularity. And again, we really need to be able to trace these raw materials from the start of the supply chain to the end of it, and to input them into a circular economy. And again, the battery passport is useful in all of this. So in my presentation, I'm just going to focus a little bit about the first two pillars, so responsible sourcing and carbon footprint, trying to give examples, but also the perspective of transparent environment in this debate. So when the Commission was working on the conception, right, on what should be included in the battery regulation, there was a long debate around due diligence. Should it be in? Should it not? What should we do? So TNE commissioned a study looking at 6 major automotive companies globally, so not just European ones, but also American and Asian companies. And we asked this consultancy to map the supply chain of these companies for cobalt specifically. What the study found, and for confidentiality reason, we cannot disclose the detail, but what it found is that at most, at a given point of the supply chain, and I think it was around the precursor or the refining, at most there were 18 companies for 6 major automotive OEMs. So what we were actually asking, and what we asked the Commission of the time is, well, this seems simple enough. We need to, the companies, we need to regulate or find out more information, more transparency about 18 companies at most at a given point in the supply chain. So a very simple message. And what the battery regulation then asks on the due diligence provisions, for those of you that aren't familiar, is to trace, to have due diligence obligations on the supply chains of cobalt, nickel, lithium, and natural graphite. For EV batteries, but also for automotive batteries. So those are the smaller ones that start the car, that jumpstart the car. Portable batteries, so phones, laptops, we all have that. And industrial batteries, so for energy storage purposes. Across, as I said, human rights due diligence, so addressing, for example, things like child labor, but also things like the right to unionize, or health and safety, for example. And then on the environmental side, and this becomes interesting because it's the first time that we have a regulation that actually has environmental due diligence provisions. So now car makers, battery makers, they're also asked to look into their environmental impacts and their supply chains, and really use a traceability system, as a system of controls and transparency. So the question is the battery passport fit for purpose, really, in all of this? So the answer is yes, but. So it's a good tool. It's an excellent tool, actually, to get the transparency and tracing, etc. It's primarily used, historically as a geographical indicator. So if we go back to the map, we know that Renault more or less sources from the DRC, then it goes to China, Japan, South Korea, and the cell manufacturing at the end happens in Poland. But it cannot be the only source of information, right? So the battery passport is only as good as the information that is put into it. And I think, this was covered very well by the previous panelists. To give you some examples, right? So what we would expect from a company in their due diligence process and actually demonstrating what they've done, and then ultimately in the information that's put into the battery passport is, what are you considering as your data set? So here, have you spoken to your workers? Have you spoken to the community? Have you engaged with your supplier? How have you engaged with your supplier? Have you taken into account, for example, a recent Human Rights Watch report that talks about the impact of bauxite mining? Well, bauxite isn't covered in the regulation, but then, we see as TNE the battery passport as a tool that is in constant evolution, and I think Volker he expressed this very well. He talked about the need for something being traceable, responsible information, the cooperation. And again, here I can bring in an example. So the battery regulation focuses primarily on NMC batteries. So batteries that have nickel, that have lithium, high content of lithium. Today, 30% of the market is an LFP battery. That is a battery that has lithium, phosphate, and iron. So what does it mean? Does it mean that in the battery passport, we're not going to look at LFP batteries and we're only going to focus more on traditional lithium-ion batteries? From TNE's perspective, and again, it was touched upon earlier around what about leather, what about plastics, right? So it's a much wider debate. Of course, there needs to be a prioritization there, and we understand, that the regulatory compliance is a priority, and we need to get it right. But we also need to start thinking about what comes next, because it was in the news this week. BMW just had a big issue with a cobalt supplier in Morocco. And there, for example, specifically, it was found there were high levels of arsenic in water. So from an environmental due diligence perspective, that is a quantitative data. It's not qualitative. It's not, are your workers happy in their job? It's a quantitative data, right? The arsenic, there's a clear threshold, and the threshold was surpassed by a lot. So what we'd like to see in the battery passport is also some of these indicators, right, around environmental due diligence, around human rights as well, but also around environmental due diligence, which are qualitative and can be disclosed. I'm going to move on from due diligence because I could spend hours talking about it, but happy to answer any questions later on. And bring in the example of carbon footprint. So this is something that TNE also sees as one of the first big priorities. The debate is now. The carbon footprint calculations are being decided right now. We'll have the first set of companies having to start to collect data in 2024 already. And again, what is the quality of the data? Are we going to take for granted, the example that we like to give, if a company is producing, is making batteries in Poland in the winter, can it claim, is it right for them to claim that these batteries have been made with solar energy produced in the summer in Spain? No, that's our view. It's very clear. We need to use real-time data as long as it's available, like primary data, right? We need to use accurate data. If that's not available, we need to use country average. But again, the battery passport is only as good as the information that you put into it. So TNE's involved a little bit in the GBA battery passport. I think there's a review right now coming up as in terms of the content. So a big focus on biodiversity, for example, a big focus on health and safety, a big focus on recycling. But so what we think as transparent environment, what it should have, and I've made this clear, is the data collected and made public at all stages of the supply chain, so not just the final product. We really need to have that supply chain transparency. We need companies in the supply chain to work together. And again, this was touched upon by Mindspatter. We need to allow for benchmarking, right, of supply chain performance. Ultimately, we need to know, recognize the companies that are doing this well, and we need to put forward the champions around this, and the laggards, they need to be exposed ultimately, because only like that then you have a race to the top. The data needs to be based on company primary data as much as possible, based on sound methodologies and not political arbitrary figures. So the example in carbon footprint, I think, was quite clear. And again, you know, the methodology aspect, that's what Francesca works on. And then finally, detailed with specific ESG indicators, right? So I gave the example of the arsenic contained, the arsenic levels, but I could give more examples around, for example, deforestation. So we have a deforestation law in Europe. So again, how do all these pieces come together? Well, they can come together quite well in the battery passport, in our opinion. Thank you.
Thank you, Cecilia. No, really very. You open up the range of topics we can address in this meeting, but I really would like us to go to some of these elements maybe deeper in the final session, also depending on what the audience thinks. But being in interest of time, maybe we move to Patricia from our team, Urban, who is researching potential challenges in implementing battery passports in Europe, using lessons from Batro and beyond. So, Patricia, yeah, the floor is all yours.
Hi. Sorry. Thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah. Good morning, everyone. So I will be presenting the preliminary outcomes of the research we've been conducting on battery passports and their potential for circular economy for batteries in the context of the BATRA project that has been presented today. We've had the opportunity to interview a lot of stakeholders from both within the project and outside of the project from across the battery value chain. And I think these are not yet the correct slides, but
This is us.
I mean, this is also nice. Yeah. Anyway, so I will give a little bit of an insight into that. I wanted to start by giving a little bit of context. Oh, yes, great, thank you. Perfect, thank you very much. All right, so, I mean, we've heard about this already today, so I will not go into that in a very detailed way, but basically we have two major legislations that are relevant in this context. On the one hand, there is the Ecodesign for Sustainable Products Regulation proposal, ESPR, which, as we've heard before, is currently under trialogues, and there are a number of performance and information requirements for products entering the EU market, with some exceptions, as well as end-of-life obligations and based on extended producer responsibility and things like that. And there is also, of course, the digital product passport introduced there. And then, of course, specific requirements then depend on future implementing and delegated acts. But for batteries, there is the batteries regulation. And we have a lot of different requirements here, mainly on sustainability and safety, which is really based on the entire battery life cycle, and then also on recycled content targets, carbon footprint, hazardous substances, etc. So, and here we have the digital battery passport, where the regulation specifies a lot of important things, but also leaves a few things open that are not clarified yet, which is then one of the key challenges for actually implementing the battery passport. So basically, there are different types of data that need to be disclosed. We have data that are open to the general public, which is, for example, on the battery model, carbon footprint, recycled content, due diligence. And then we also have data that are needed to actually support dismantling, repair, recycling processes, etc., that are usually more sensitive. And these are open to persons with legitimate interest. which is not quite clear yet what that means, and partly to the Commission as well. And the batteries regulation also stresses the need for interoperable standards, of course, which is another key issue in this regard. Yes, I think for time reasons, I will probably not go into much detail here, but we've already heard that the battery passport has a lot of potential, and the question is, can we overcome all of the challenges we're discussing today in order to really unleash this potential and to have this increased supply chain transparency, to reduce environmental and social risks along supply chain, and to facilitate second life or end of life processes. There have been a few emerging initiatives developing either battery passports themselves or content guidances. There are more digital product passports also in other sectors, but here we have, of course, Mindsbetter, the Global Battery Alliance, Surpass, and also the German Battery Pass that develops content guidance. So our key challenges that we've identified in our research mainly come down to policy challenges and supply chain challenges. In the realm of policy, we see that a lot of companies are facing difficulties in implementing the requirements from the battery regulation. So as we've heard before, there is a lot of difficulty in obtaining data due to a reluctance to want to share data. But there has also been a feasibility issue regarding the time horizon, because 2027 is quite close, and we have a lot of things that are not yet specified and will only be specified in upcoming implementing and delegating acts. So this is an open question if that will be enough time. And there has also been the issue of feasibility for smaller companies, which will be facing much bigger hurdles than bigger companies. There are a few legal uncertainties, which I already alluded to. So we don't quite know enough about access rights. And then there is also the issue of who's responsible for the battery passport, which seems straightforward at first glance because it's the economic operator putting the battery onto the market. But then there are different cases where it gets more complicated, such as when it comes to imports, or what happens to data after recycling, who actually is responsible for destroying the data, things like that. And the interoperability standards have yet to be defined as well. Some interviewees have also expressed concerns regarding the requirements in the battery regulation, saying that, for example, due diligence requirements, as we've just also talked about, are not ambitious enough and mainly focus on sourcing. And then there is also the question of how can we verify data coming from third countries outside of the EU. And finally, supply chain challenges. So as mentioned, the reluctance to share data as they are potentially sensitive. There are non-disclosure agreements, and there is a general lack of cooperation among supply chains, and the reluctance due to the uncertainty regarding access rights. And this is closely connected to a lack of knowledge, which is crucial for actually implementing the digital product passport, because currently there is a lot of uncertainty regarding the product contents and risks, and this needs to be disclosed to dismantlers, repairers, recyclers in order to minimize risks, and also to be able to do this within a time frame that is reasonable and allows for scalability. And currently, this may not always be possible. So these are briefly the main results for now, and I pass over to Vasilis again.
Thank you, Patricia, and hopefully we'll be having a paper to share by the end of the year and contribute to the debate, ongoing debate on the digital product passport. Okay, it's the favorite time of the event, the discussion time. So I have a long list of questions that I would like to pose to the speakers, but I would like to give the opportunity to anyone to break the ice. Do you have any questions, something that you want to come in, or maybe you wait for later? Yeah, if you can introduce yourself and the organization where you come from. Yeah.
Hello, hi. Antonio Dammaro from British Standards Institution. So I do understand how standards are important in all of this space. And I have a question to Volker, and touching on what Ozak was saying, we have a lot of DPP as a service out there. And obviously we need to make sure that there's interoperability among them. Standards is important. And my question, when you were presenting, you were saying you have a digital battery passport which is compliant with the regulation. But with the lack of delegated and implemented acts, with all of the framework like Gaia X, Catena X, how can minor SPIDE really be compliant?
Yeah, thank you for this question. First of all, we are compliant with what we see at the moment. And if there's something missing, then it is open, of course. And as I said, we try to develop a platform that is adaptive, that is flexible, that is working with tools that help to adapt to specific scenarios in specific industries, because some industries go forward, like we see this battery passport is for batteries and for specific types of batteries and for specific industry setups, for example, European ones. It's not for Asia or for America, although they are very closely linked together, as we saw in these pictures. And we try to develop something that that is flexible enough to adopt if something is needed. But in the end, as we said already, it's about standards. We can implement workflows according to the standards as needed. In terms of the quality of the data, this is another thing. I mean, we are not the ones who check the data, but we implement tools that help people to say, okay, for example, there's a data set that is confidential, but you can open a door for an auditor. That means if needed, this can be done. If it's needed that that certain information has to be published for everyone at the very beginning, then we offer that opportunity. If a company makes use of that, it's up to their discretion. I mean, we don't force people to do that because this is a law that forces people if needed. But as I said, the platform, the technology is there. One thing that we have to consider also is that these technologies sometimes can push people in a specific direction. For example, what we see, what is making a difference is we hear a lot that you can, let's say you upload any kind of data and no one checked it. It can be anything that is worth nothing because it's untrue or it's only half of the true or whatever. But it can be that the data, I mean, you can't change it. It's there, it's in this data environment. So when needed, later someone can check it. The question is now, do we check everything once it comes into the system at the very beginning? That would require a lot of effort to check every data set at the moment when it comes into the system. At the moment, we prefer the way that, okay, when needed, then you can check data, for example, because it's relevant for the supply chain that goes to Europe. Oh, sorry. Yeah. Yeah. That goes to Europe. Because there are there may be some laws that require you to check that and to have an audit. Does that mean that everyone needs to audit everything? I think it makes sense that people coordinate that specific institutions or people or governments that you trust check these specific data sets and qualify it. You may have additional checks for specific reasons, for example, because things go into specific industries or so, or there are quality standards that you want to meet. This is all quite flexible and develops over time. So this is why I think, the technology pushes people into a specific direction, but also helps people to adopt in the industry as expected by the consumers and by the laws. Does that answer your question?
The first part did.
Sorry.
Okay, good.
Sorry.
Very good. Maybe you can come back later and think about the second part. I also ask a few questions myself. The first one is a little bit more on due diligence, so maybe it's more for Cecilia. I think, Cecilia, you shared your thoughts that basically the digital product passport can be the starting point, but in the future we can see further qualitative indicators, perhaps on human rights, or even quantitative indicators on environmental impacts that could be further be incorporated in the digital product passport. I'm wondering if, in your view, you think that this should be actually a one-stop solution for companies in the future, knowing that there are many requirements coming from different pieces of legislation. We will have also the end-of-life vehicle regulation coming in the future. So, and there is always the discussion of we need coherence, we need all of the different pieces of law to align with each other. So do you think that this should be coming under the framework of the digital product passport, and or whether you think that there are other pieces of legislation that we could look into the ambition and maybe give some time for the companies to prepare? And while I give you a few minutes to think about it, I have another question that maybe is for the rest of the speakers. I heard a lot about the reluctance of sharing data, and I think I would like to hear a little bit your thoughts on whether there are any particular types of data where you see that companies are very reluctant to share. I think that's important. Because of course we're talking about a very diverse range of data that need to be inserted in the digital product passport. So I'm wondering, are there any particular streams that are very difficult at the moment to obtain or to find to collect from your supply chain partners? And then the confidentiality of data is a key concern, which I understand that very often companies are used to share data only on the basis of non-disclosure agreements. But the question is, what can we do at the European Union level to encourage companies to share that? I mean, will the requirements of the regulation will be enough in the end to convince companies to start moving in this direction? Of course, it will be an obligation, but that does not mean there will not be challenges in implementation. So any thoughts on this will be useful. I don't know if, Cecilia, would you like to go first on the due diligence, and then we go in order? Yeah.
So the good news about due diligence is that the provisions already come into force in 2025, right? So that's before the battery passport, meaning companies will already have this nice set of data. Already, they're working on it now. 2025, it goes into force. So it'll be into force already for 2 years before we decide to include some of it, all of it, in the battery passport. I want to be very clear that, the battery passport, digital product passports, we see them as being very useful, but they are a tool, right? They convey information. We need to, trust. I'm not an engineer. I trust the engineering behind it, that it's reliable, et cetera, et cetera. But what I am is, I work on policy, and I want to trust the data that is then presented to me, right? To a degree of transparency that is sufficient for me to have a critical view around the information that is there that I can see. An example is, so as Transparent Environment, so I work a lot with car companies, battery companies, but also mining companies. And one of the things that we do support in this realm of auditing and transparent information is an initiative called IRMA, the Initiative for Responsible Mining Assurance, whereby IRMA offers a standard, a very ambitious human rights and environmental standard that mining companies can be audited against. The results of those audits are publicly available in full. Not a summary, not a one-page summary, not a two-page summary, not a tick box thing. The audit result is available in full. So that allows me, Cecilia, to analyze it, to understand, and then to engage with the company and say, oh, why did you score so low here? Or why, that's a very good result on this indicator. Can we talk more about it and find out what you're doing that's right? I would like to see that detailed information in the battery passport. Otherwise, the battery passport, for me, it's just a superficial tool, right? So if I have access to good quality information, I will be very happy in 2027.
Very good. Ozak, would you like to kick off the comments on the data confidentiality concerns and the sharing of data? Are there any particular data actually that you are lacking from your suppliers and you see it's very difficult to obtain? Yeah.
Yeah. Actually, from this project and in general, there are a lot of different examples. For example, I can start from this. Yeah, we have a conflict mineral policy because I start with the Cecilia comments. Yeah, we have a conflict mineral policy and supplier code of conduct, and we actually our suppliers obligated to meet our conflict mineral policy and supplier code of conduct. but we can't go dive into the all of the supply chain, and that supplier doesn't want to share the information with us. And I can understand that, but because yeah, if we know the supplier sourcing actually, and the other supply chain companies and the places, we can understand the cost of the operation, and we might dive the supplier and for the cost reduction, but they don't want to share this information, and for some reasonable concerns actually, but they have to show actually they meet our conflict mineral policy, I think. Right now it's all in the agreements, they all agree, and yeah, right now in our position actually, if there is anything occurred, and yeah, this the responsible is the supplier, because they already signed all the documents. But I think this is not the best way. Somehow we have to trace, and we have to actually, and to be sure, is this a really sustainable supply chain. And also another thing, for the EV battery passport, we have to understand the carbon footprint of the EV battery. And to understand this, we have to know the production method, the consuming energy, the energy sources. And also they don't want to share this. And yeah, because the reason they said, yeah, this is not mandatory right now. We haven't the regulation right now. If the regulation happens, okay, we can share everything, yeah, and not everything, the results, not the details. But until now, they don't want to share anything. I know a lot of battery suppliers working on the LCA, and they have the data and they have the results. They don't want to share. I don't know all of the reason actually, but the main reason, actually, they don't have to do this right now, and they said they will do when the regulation comes. But in our position, we have to create a strategy, and we have to our roadmap for carbon neutrality, and we are depending on this kind of suppliers. So it's a bit challenging for us.
Francesca, a very related question linked to the sharing of data is trust. And I think we heard already that data can be shared, but there's a question: can we trust data, especially when we go much deep into global supply chains, and what role can standards play in this regard? Yeah.
Thank you. I think trust needs to be built at first behind also some commercial relationship, and this is something that is outside the standards. What standards people can help you doing, and I tell you, we are useless people, okay? But something we are really good at doing is having around the table different entities along the same supply chain, very long and complex supply chains, and then establish trust through the goals that everybody needs to achieve. So actually having regulation is of course a multiplier for standards. And for so long, I repeat, I also said it in the previous part, without the regulators, circularity was stuck. We have seen it. I mean, those of you who are old enough, you will remember how many beautiful projects we've been doing in the last 30 years to achieve circularity in one company, in one supply chain, in one sector, in another one. We spent, I hope calculations are available to see how much has been spent without really going to the next phase. Even during the COVID period, CO2 emissions were raising. Okay, so it gives us a measure and an understanding of what is really at stake. So trust is fundamental, but there are ways to approach data that can enable also trust. And actually, for instance, making a list of confidential data elements, it doesn't mean that you need to tell me what's inside. It's just a data element that is confidential. At least having a transparent methodology on which are the data attributes that are confidential and which are the data attributes that can be shared. Already this would be a big achievement, I tell you, based on we supervise 30 supply chains globally, and all the sectors that are next. I see this as a cross challenge everywhere. So we are not asking companies to say the exact content, but at least having a list of what is really controversial, and then set them out of the table and saying, okay, the DPP will be a starting point. We said it's a dynamic tool, okay? We need to start. It's like if us, the humans, we would have passports today with all our medical history, for instance. Why, when you go to the airport, you just show the name, the surname, some data elements, and not all your history of your why you don't do so? But if you look for a medical assistant, well, you better have all your medical records with you, right? It's a little bit the same thing. It's just like different boxes all together in a big box. So we hope the DPP will be the bigger one at the beginning, the non-controversial one, because sometimes we still hear companies saying that even the information that is on the label cannot be digitalized. I mean, can you believe this? I mean, I see many faces who are smiling, but I hear this. I still hear this. I say, hey, you have it on the label. Why don't you want to put it digital? Because, well, but the power of having all labels all together in a place digital makes me more vulnerable. We believe it makes you stronger. It makes you a more trusted partner. But there are these opinions that need to be, of course, changed and overcome. So I think standards are a tool that can help building data. But I repeat, these must be standards that follow the entire supply chain, because having a small focus in one area is not going to make it changing. It's like you taking care only of your garden and not knocking at the door of your neighbor and saying, hey, me, I'm keeping biodiversity, but if you keep on using all these chemical substances, what do I do with my beautiful fruit that I'm growing only here, right? That's the same. These are global matters. And so I think somebody needs to say to the European Union that global matters on circularity as well. And we understand that they have a focus on the jurisdiction limited to Europe, of course. But they are also a very powerful partner in international tables and in the international trade agreements. And not having the sustainability annex of several international trade agreements done, but stuck, is not helping the debate on the digital product passport neither at the end, right? So you need to walk the talk and use all the digital tools. And I wanted to take the opportunity, I don't know if I will have the floor again, I wanted to address one of the topic. Okay, then I'll do it later.
Okay, good. Patricia, any thoughts from your regard? Yeah.
Yes. So I think we have basically two tools for kind of dealing with these concerns about confidentiality and data sharing. And one is, of course, policy. So there, as I mentioned before in my presentation, there are a few things that still need to be clarified. But once we know who has access to which kind of data, this will be a key enabler, because, for example, we know that dismantlers, repairers, recyclers, they need access to data on the battery management system. What happened with the battery before? What are key components? But not everybody needs this data. So maybe this will alleviate, or hopefully this is what interviewees have expressed. This will alleviate concerns that potentially reverse engineering could take place, and that this is really just used to actually increase end of life or second life operations. And then, of course, as has been mentioned, supply chain partnerships will be crucial. And here we can create awareness from several value chain actors of who actually needs what kind of data, and why is the data that I have relevant to other actors among the supply chain, and what will happen with this data. And their cooperation is key in order to really create this awareness and understanding. And I think we already, through these kind of pilot projects that we have right now, maybe other companies can also see what is possible, and how this can be leveraged and made into something that will really profit circularity, but also companies' own goals and ambitions.
Very good. Thank you, Patricia. Volker, any thoughts? And what about integrating some of the elements that Cecilia mentioned in the digital product passport, these qualitative and quantitative indicators? I mean, do you think we are there yet? Do you think that that can be feasible in the medium term, maybe? Yeah.
I mean, we are not there yet, obviously. And it's still, from my perspective, I think it's a long way to go. But we have to start somewhere. And we have to start with the low-hanging fruits. I think that's the easiest way to convince people. And I think, as I said at the very beginning, we have to convince people why. What is in for them? What is the improvement that we get? And who is getting these improvements? Who is benefiting from it? For example, when we want to have healthy conditions in the mines. If we know where the stuff comes from, then we can check it. It can still happen that something does go wrong, as we see in the news, for example, with BMW, but now we can check out in more detail, why did this go this way? Why does it happen that people are underpaid or that environmental things are going wrong? I mean, this is illegal not only because we see it, it was illegal from the very beginning how they produce this material. If this is correct, what is reported in the news. I mean, I haven't been there. But it's not something that that BMW has caused from the beginning, as far as I see it from this perspective. But nevertheless, what I'm saying is, when we introduce, for example, when we have companies who say, okay, this is confidential information, it's IP that I want to protect, and I understand that fully. Many companies and our business system is building on that. But it may be that someone who is authorized to check this information can see it. It must not be the competitor. It can be an institution or an NGO or someone else people agree on. Okay, he is authorized to check it and confirm or disqualify information, and then you do the next step. Do you do that from the very beginning for all products? I think we are not there yet that we have enough people to do that. I mean, we are just at the start. But we can start somewhere. We can start with the most critical materials, with the most energy consuming products, with the most obvious problems that we have to deal with. And then we go from there. That's what I think.
Very,
Sorry, just one remark. Among the most obvious, among the most obvious is the name and the surname of the product. If you do not use product data standards to identify exactly the component, the raw material, the field, and there are standards for this. So that's really just like not putting the name and the surname of the person in a passport and then saying many other data information about the person, right? But if I don't know the name and the surname and the age, how can I even, understand? Right, that's why even on the human passports, there are some international agreements on the basic data elements that every passport needs to check. Then we have security features, we have visas, we have a lot of data. The technology can help to go to a level we can't even imagine today with, the recent artificial intelligence usage, if we do it for the right purposes. So I think really it starts with at least naming the objects and the components in the way it does. We see resistance even in this, because I tell you, I can give a name to my children that I only know, but is it useful? When they go to school, when they go to doing some sport activities, if they use different names, is it useful for anybody? Just to create walls, just to impede the data to circulate on the precise information. So even this still today is revolutionary, while, this is happening since 50 years. You go to the supermarket, you scan, behind this there is a product description, there is a price that is known only between that retailer that is selling that product to you, to your consumer in that moment. And price is one of the most confidential data elements, but I say it happens every day already, and the manufacturer that created a product may not know the exact price of what is being sold in that day, in that supermarket, for that consumers in that environment, right? It happens. It's just behind a beep. So I think we need to demystify some of the big issues that we hear, and at least go back to the basic elements, Cecilia. And I think with a solid passport, we can go to the next level. But you know, wanting it all immediately, I think will slow it down. So we need to, that's my, sorry, I wanted to build on what you just said because I think it's important. The demystification of some of the data elements compared to what really happens already every day in the market for business reasons. Huh? The reason why they exchange the price is because it's more efficient, because this is the only way I can sell the products every day on the market, right? But if you ask, is the price a confidential data matter? Oh, yes, of course it is. No, I cannot disclose my prices. But, I mean, if in one day you go all around the same supermarkets and you compare the prices, you are done, right? They are publicly available. So that's the point. How are we going to use the data and for which purpose? This is where the regulators need to do, to continue the job that they've been already doing in Europe, but in other areas of the world, this is still totally absent.
Very good, thank you. Yeah. I would like to at least give the opportunity to the audience to provide a couple of more questions. So any thoughts? Yeah, please.
Hi everyone, thank you very much. My name is Emma Colato. I'm a government affairs lead for EMEA at Dual Solutions. We are a global safety science company for testing, inspection and certification. And I wanted to go back to some of the elements that were mentioned before by the speakers, because I can see that you make an interplay between the battery passport and the digital product passport. So I wanted to hear a little bit your comments and thoughts on the need or not for harmonization on what each digital product passport requires for technical specifications, for instance, under each particular legislation. Because for the time being, I can see it in the Ecodesign regulation, it's in the battery, I think it's also in the toy safety regulation. So what should we be asking, or what should the regulator have in mind when going forward with all these types of passports on products, especially when some of the products may be used in other products?
Any other question? Any thought? Yeah, please.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. My name is Kaisa Toroskainen. I'm from the Global Battery Alliance. So thanks for referencing us already, Cecilia. And thanks for a very insightful discussion. I don't want to speak very long, but just wanted to contribute briefly to the discussion on due diligence and just to effectively mention a couple of things about the Global Battery Alliance battery passport in terms of it being really focused on the content guidance in terms of not only fulfilling regulatory compliance in the European Union according to the battery regulation and also the critical materials act that now is coming up in terms of due diligence, but also really fostering this race to the top. So our battery passport will cover all materials regardless of whether they are covered by the EU battery regulation and also how much is their volume or their composition in the battery. It will also comprise of a product passport as well as a company quality seal, so it will provide that full value chain transparency through that perspective. And it will aim to really incorporate existing standards, the IRMA, as was mentioned, OECD 6-step process of verification from stakeholder consultation to grievance mechanism, etc. So the idea is really that there is a sort of a gap between minimum regulatory compliance and best possible performance, and the battery passport framework, indicator framework, will allow consumers and regulators, etc., to assess companies on that gap. On data availability, in the beginning, it's true that potentially not all that data is available, but we really want to create a framework that also fosters or encourages this progress over time to completion. So these are just a few elements that hopefully will aim to respond to some of these concerns around due diligence and sort of full coverage of ESG issues. The battery passport is technology agnostic, and really aims at this interoperability between different service providers. So we really hope that we can work with many of you in the room on the implementation part. Well, this is really not meant to be a pitch of our battery passport, but more to just, connect a few dots. And I had a couple of questions as well. According to some research that we've been doing in this kind of regulatory mapping and standards mapping across the value chain, effectively the IRMA, etc., the upstream part of the value chain is very well covered. However, in terms of circularity and battery recycling, beyond this emerging regulation, standards that go beyond are a little bit less developed, let's say. So if panelists here have any ideas on where to look for the sort of best practice in this regard, that would be really helpful. And my second question is, as we are discussing the indicator framework and aggregation of data for consumers to have a clear passport that they can look at in terms of is this product better than another one, but then also potentially for regulators to look into, and NGOs and other stakeholders to look into data in more detail. Are there other product passports that you would recommend as examples or references that are particularly that capture this complexity particularly well? Sorry for a long contribution, and thanks again.
No, these are good questions, and by the way, we are doing similar work, so we should connect afterwards. Is there any final question? Somebody that wants to say something or ask? Okay, maybe that's the final round of questions. And yeah, I mean, there are basically two or three questions. The first one relates to how do we align requirements from the digital product passport and the digital battery passport, and whether one can fit the other, or whether we can create some confusion as well for companies. I think that's one concern, and I think both Volker and Franziska, maybe you have some comments on it. And then on the question on standards and whether there are any other standards that we should be aware of, I think Franziska, maybe you have an idea. And other digital product passport, I don't know, Volker, if you want to speak for any of your competitors. But I think that because we have also done our own Google research, I mean, you can see that which are the DPPs that are emerging, and some of them come from European Union projects funded, but there are also some that they started independently, I think. Any DPP that we missed, please feel free to share it. So I give the floor to Francesca and Volker, and if any of the other speakers want to say something, they can come in as well.
I can start, thank you. So where should I start? The first question in terms of other product passports or in platforms or consortia, what I want to say first to this is it's very important that we have a variety of offers in this respect. MindSpider doesn't want to be the only one, and it's really helpful that many people are working on these fronts, have different backgrounds and develop different tools for the industry that they come from, because this is where they have the specific knowledge. Let's say when you are involved in pharmaceuticals or in chemicals, it makes sense that you start from there to understand what the industry needs and is willing to do, and what the specific problems are. And I'm sure, and I know that some of our competitors, they focus on specific industries, and that's good. And there's overlap, of course. There are different tools for batteries, and I think it's good that we have different kinds of offers out there. And yeah, everyone has, I think, its advantages. And over time, and this is where the standards come into play, we need to provide interoperability. That means that data can move from one platform to the other, as it is the same with playlists that you have when you want to hear music or when you want to see films or so. I think it makes sense that this is provided, and the industry is usually keen on that, and also in making sure that not only one competitor collects it all, but that there's a variety. But still, as we see with the barcode, it helps that we speak the same language and that we can understand the same data and also qualify it. So understand, what does the data set mean? What is it exactly? And for example, of course, a full report, as you said, is really helpful and needed. But it's not, let's say you are in a grocery store, you scan something, do you want to read the full report of an audit of a producer of salad, for example? Usually not, but you want to trust someone who has read it and checked it, and he has to have access to it. So I think in the end, what data is available, what data is exchanged between these different platforms, this will be all to be sorted out, but the regulation, for the battery regulation at least, it says that we have to provide for this interoperability. The methodology is still to be developed, but I think we as MindSpider, we are open for that. The next question again was what? On the interplay between digital product passport and yeah. Yeah, I think this is very close to what I just said. I mean, the battery passport is designed for the battery industry. And I assume it's because if you remember the acid-lead batteries, this is an industry that is already, since years, exchanging information from one party to another because it's hazardous metals involved and health and safety issues involved. So this is why this industry has already developed an environment where we could learn from. And also, it is something where, how can I say, where it's already a high recycling quotient involved. So I think 98% of an acid-lead battery is already recycled. So I think this was an easy way to, easy in brackets, but it's something where you can start with. But it will develop over time in other industries too. And as we hear, when you see the idea of the Green Deal is that we have these kind of tools for every product. And when you talk about every product, you mean every company involved with that too, because it's not only the product, you want to know the company behind that product. So this means I can imagine that over time this will go deeper and deeper in all kinds of industries, in all kinds of products. In the end, we have to not to forget why we do this. We want to have healthy and safe products on the market that don't harm environment and people and human beings. And I think this is valid for everything that we touch and eat and work with. So yeah, although we have to start somewhere. So
I fully agree, but with a difference, I think. So the offer of digital product passport should flourish. Yes, that's a good way to keep it. At first, to respect competition cautions, but also to have also the data side of it flourishing, because we can achieve this goal as well. So why shouldn't we do it? On the other side, I think that regulators need to be non-discriminatory. So why should they put the request, to answer to the question of our colleague here, why should they ask 30 data attributes to the electrical vehicles batteries, because these are new products considered, right? New products, and they have a relatively simpler supply chain, as Cecilia showed on their study. Why should they ask them more and ask less to, I don't know, textile or something? So I think at the beginning, the data structure should be really the same, because behind every difference there is a discrimination. So, and we shouldn't discriminate one sector or the other one. So we need to ask to every sector to be at that level of transparency. So, and this is where, the balance can be, I think when I started discussing with them, frankly, they were already in agreement on the CO2 emission as the first data attributes that they should be included. We support this, but we also had questions on other data attributes. I mean, we are neutral, so why do you include the CO2 and you don't include the origin of the raw materials or the primary raw material? I don't know. Like in the food sector or in other sectors that we are watching quite closely. And the answer was that they decide, okay, we have a common structure, but they shouldn't ask more to some and less to others. I think the passport, like for us, the human beings, is the same everywhere. Otherwise, you don't go at the airport, you don't travel. And we want sustainable goods to travel and to move all around the globe. Because as I said before, otherwise you have a beautiful garden where everybody is dreaming about being sustainable, but actually it's just a place where you don't ask questions about where do my product come from, or where due diligence issues on this or that issue. So I think having a common structure from the data perspective helps the starting point. Otherwise, every sector will start lobbying. I want this less. I want this more. I want that less, and then it becomes really just a data tool. While we want this to be ambitious, we don't want to be, what did you say, Cecilia, fashionable? We don't want this to be a fashionable data. I liked what you said. It shouldn't be a fashionable data, fancy thing. It should be something that we can rely on to build the next level. And then, you know, there is a standard today that several standardization body offer at global level and national level and so on. There are different versions of it. It's a standard that enables the magic of the web to be coordinated with the product code that you have in your hands. I don't want to be too technical, but you can imagine what happens when you expand in the web all the information you can get, while at the same time having a concrete product in your hands. Because the web can do a lot of things bad and wrong, but if you link that information to a digital product passport and to the exact name of the product you have in your hands through a standard, you get the potential of annexing all information you want at the speed that we cannot even check as consumers. I tell you, you click on that carrier and you get a word of information that needs to be really meaningful for you. Otherwise, you even get too much, right? So there are standards that enable this. These standards are called, for instance, in our world, the GS1 Digital Link. Other standardization body offers similar things. There soon will be an ISO standard on this way on how you mix product information, real product information, and the web information the companies can handle and can update every day. As soon as the CO2 emission changes on that product, you can update the information immediately so that the digital product passport is alive. It's not something that you keep for 20 years without changing your picture, like for humans, okay? So there is this potential today, but we need to start from a common and non-discriminatory data approach for all sectors and then include more specific data attributes. I'm not against having specific data attributes, of course. Depending, of course, everybody understands that the battery is not like a cotton t-shirt done with one single raw material, maybe done locally, I don't know. So there are differences that can be leveraged and must be leveraged, but at first not confusing anybody, because confusing means slowing it down. And we really need it to go to the next level, right? Thank you.
Thank you, Francisca. Cecilia, you wanted to have some final remarks as well.
Yeah. Just a minute. We as TNE want the European battery industry, the European automotive industry to lead on this. That's very clear. The agricultural sector, the jewelry sector, et cetera, you know, they've been toying around with tracing for a long time, but we really have an opportunity now with the battery regulation for the automotive sector to take the lead, and I don't see that as a bad thing. They can set the standard, and then the other sectors will have to adapt. I mean, 2024, carbon footprint, 2025, due diligence, 2027, battery passport. We'll have that information already ready. They'll have to come to an agreement before the battery passport is legally enters into force on what type of data and how do we disclose the data. And then the other sectors can follow. That's TNE's view, and we really want to see Europe in the lead.
Thank you, Cecilia. That was very clear. Good, maybe because since we're already 10 minutes ahead, a word of applause for our speakers. Yeah. I think this is the beginning of the journey for the digital product passport. There is really a lot of interest. I confirm it from SEPS because we receive a lot of requests from our partners internationally that they want to learn what is happening in Europe on the digital product passport. I mean, we're not developing a passport, but people want to learn from us. So I think there's a lot of hype, and in many ways, Europe is leading the way in these discussions, which is something quite interesting in this new geopolitical environment. Then this is also, of course, the beginning of the journey for BATRO as well, and there will be more policy events, more occasions in the future to be showcasing our results. So stay tuned. Use our website, batro.eu. There's a newsletter as well that you can register, and hopefully there will be, there will be more occasions to show our impact and how our pilot cases make a difference in Europe. So thank you very much. There's lunch downstairs, and yeah, hope to see you soon in another event of SEPS.